Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Great to see you all. I think we'll go ahead and get started, and the rest will hopefully join us very, very quickly. My name is Dick Paul. I'm the Vice Chair of FLC's National Advisory Council, and I'm a member of the FLC Program Committee, chaired by Kathleen McDonald. And my responsibility on the Program Committee is organizing Industry Day. So the day is here, and we're delighted that all of you are here to attend it. Just to set the stage, I think you know the architecture of our FLC national meetings very well. Yesterday, we heard some very informative presentations on what I would call internally focused items of interest to the ORDAs and the tech transfer offices, including lessons learned in licensing and patent litigation. We heard about I-Corps from NSF and the adaptation of I-Corps in the Department of Energy and Department of Agriculture, which were fascinating. We heard about measurement of tech transfer outcomes and impacts. We heard about FLC business and tech transfer tools, and we heard best practices from some of the small agencies and from our Lab Director of the Year recipient. So today we switch gears, and today is more externally focused, where we invite external stakeholders in the tech transfer ecosystem to join us, and particularly industry, to share their perspectives regarding tech transfer and working with the federal labs. What's worked, what we could do better in terms of interacting with the ecosystem outside of the lab community. How do these external stakeholders approach innovation and collaboration? And how can we in the federal lab community have a more robust relationship with these external organizations to further the tech transfer mission? So that's what the focus of today is, more of the external perspective. I think we're in an ideal setting in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is the 8th largest metropolitan economy in the United States. It's one of the world's top research destinations, and there's a tremendous amount of collaboration that takes place here. And a little later, we're going to hear from 3 Philadelphia-based organizations about how they do approach collaboration and how things work. So we have 5 sessions today, and I'll do just a very brief overview, and then we'll get on with the program. First, we have a keynote by Tom Osha, and I'll introduce Tom right here in just a second. The second session is what we're calling Incubator and Accelerator panel, and that's a panel where we have 3 Philadelphia organizations that include Ben Franklin Technology Partners, Drexel University, and University City Science Center. And that panel will be moderated by Robert Hurd, one of my colleagues on the National Advisory Council. Session 3, just before lunch, we have a panel from one of the National Manufacturing Institute centers, and this one specifically is the Center on Advanced Composites Manufacturing Innovation. And we have participants from the federal labs, from industry, from academia, and we're going to hear about their collaboration model and how they go about in these 3 entities in collaborating on specific projects of interest to all of them. That panel will be moderated by Joe Fox of Ashland. Then after lunch, we're going to hear a panel comprised of stakeholders from the Water Council of Milwaukee. And you may recall that water is the first technology focus area of the FLC, and the Water Council is what we call the bridge organization between the FLC and the federal lab community and water-related industries. So the Water Council is going to talk to us about their perspective on industry's perspective on water-related technologies and how the federal labs might work with them as we continue our water technology focus area. That will be moderated by Karen Frost of the Water Council. So we'll introduce all those people in more detail later. And then finally, as John DeMint has reminded us several times, we're very fortunate to have Dr. Walt Copan here. Dr. Copan is the Undersecretary of Commerce for Standards and Technologies, and he's the Director of NIST. And he's going to share with us the Return on Investment initiative that he is spearheading, which is of great interest to all of us because it's focused on technology transfer. I want to also call attention to all the booths and the exhibitors, and hopefully you've had a chance to go by and see them. One of them, the is the Minority Business Development Agency, and I wanted to give a special shout out to them because they've conducted a panel the last couple of years. We were not able to work them in, but they graciously came and set up a booth. So I encourage you to go by all the booths, but stop by MBDA because they have some minority businesses who have technology needs, and the federal labs are a source of satisfying those technology needs. So with that overview, I'd like to get on with the program and introduce our keynote speaker, Tom Osha. Tom is the Senior Vice President of Innovation and Economic Development of Wexford Science and Technology. And in this role, he guides implementation of Wexford's knowledge community strategy across an array of stakeholders to position their research parks as critical hubs in regional innovation ecosystems, and you'll hear more about that from Tom. He's delivered a number of keynotes on creating ecosystems to help stakeholders such as universities, research institutions, cities, regions, and the federal government leverage their research and development into technology-led or technology-based economic development, which is right in the heart of what our interest is. He serves as an innovation advisor to the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade in Canada and to NATO, so he's involved in global innovation. He has experience on the legislative side as well. He served as a special assistant to U.S. Senator Richard Lugar of Indiana and to the Reagan administration, where he provided foreign policy advice. And so he is really a much sought after speaker because of his global perspective on innovation and ecosystems for innovation. He's appeared on CNN, CNBC, CBS, among others. His opinions appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Business Week, Fortune, New York Times. When I contacted Tom during an exploratory call, he indicated he's well aware of FLC and the federal lab community. He spent time at Hampton Roads and interacted with NASA, Thomas Jefferson Labs, and throughout the Mid-Atlantic region in particular, and we were just chatting about his familiarity with our regional meetings. So he knows our audience very well, and I think his remarks will be very relevant. So without further ado, would you help me welcome as our keynote speaker, Tom Osha.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Well, good morning. How's everybody doing? Good, good. Well, I will apologize if I sound a little nasally. I'm not sure whether it's allergies, the person I was sitting next to on the plane who kept sneezing, or the fact that I've crossed 16 time zones in the last 5 days. So, but I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be in Philadelphia. And as Dick said, Philadelphia is a great place for you to be having this meeting, as a matter of fact, because of the innovation that's going on here. I'll actually talk a little bit about that. I won't step on what Drexel or the Science Center, both of whom are very good partners of ours, will have to say a little bit later, but I want to give you a flavor for some of the things happening. You know, it's interesting that we would be meeting today. I don't know if anybody realizes it, but today is the anniversary of the SALT trials, right, which were really one of the first large-scale collaborative translational trial that solved a specific global problem. And now, you know, we celebrate this. Everybody knows about the trials. You Google it, you know, and it comes up that we've basically cured polio in our lifetime. But as I was also reading yesterday on the plane from LA, the 75 breakthroughs that came out of the federal labs. And every single breakthrough that was on that list has touched our lives in one way or another today. And so, largely due to your efforts, we have a number of the things that we take for granted. Again, translational stuff that solved big problems, right? And so, innovation is nothing that I need to stand up here and talk to you about. Discovery and research are things that I don't need to talk to you about. But I think what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is together, maybe we'll unpack a couple of the trends that are coming to help you maybe stay ahead of them in thinking about the spatial relationship of innovation to the partners that you both have and the partners that you seek. You know, today, we think about the environment for innovation. There's a number of drivers that have evolved over the last few decades and are particularly relevant today. First and foremost among these is that innovation is become entirely a social enterprise. Now that changes the nature of our work, and it changes the nature of where we conduct that work, right? Gone are the days of the single inventor in their laboratory happening to say, Watson, come here, right? Now we do what I call wolf pack innovation, right? Where everybody comes together. You have engineers, you have designers, you have anthropologists, you have tinkerers, both professionals and amateurs coming together to create something. And so that environment is much different than the way that we have traditionally thought about it. Now, I know everybody in this room knows that talent is the real currency of innovation. Absolutely nothing substitutes for it, and everything follows it. So I have the pleasure of traveling about 280 days a year. I see about 100 cities, about 100 universities. I see a lot of innovation districts. And so when I'm with the city and I talk to them about what's the number one problem you have in innovation or creating more startups or making your entrepreneurial ecosystem stronger, and they say, oh, money. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough venture capital. I know they got a talent problem. Right? Money follows talent. And so being around talent is one of the most important things that companies are looking for today when they're choosing partners. And I know continuing to bring great talent into the federal labs is an issue as well. Number 3, capital efficiency these days is demanding that we concentrate resources, particularly for young and growing companies. So there's still money to be had out there in the startup ecosystems. People are still getting seed funding, they're getting their round A's, they're getting that, but it's coming in smaller and smaller bites. Therefore, they need to concentrate their resources. So gone are the days of the bubble in the 2000s where just as a signing bonus you got a BMW and a puppy and they were giving you everything, and new companies would start and immediately take 100,000 square feet of office space kitted out with ping pong tables and beer taps and everything else. Or tech company, life science companies would kit out full laboratories, spending $1,000 a square foot to build a kitted out lab that would be the envy of any university. And then all to tank. Today, what's happening is they're realizing I need to concentrate resources. Concentrate also means I need to share resources. And so now things like the emergence of Cambridge biolabs. So if anybody has been to Cambridge, to Kendall Square, there's something actually called Lab Central. I think its address is like 700 Main or something. Lab Central is a shared wet lab environment. You can go in with your credit card and your science, swipe your credit card, and you've got a 6-foot shared bench that you can sit at and do your science. You can even go to a vending machine and get your buffers and your reagents. You need a fluoroscope? They've got one there. You need gas spectrometry? No problem, they've got the room there. Need a confocal microscope? No problem. They've got the relationships with MIT and others there. So we're sharing these kinds of resources, right? Making ourselves much more efficient and allowing our capital to go farther. And what that really means is that real estate today is valued on its creative and productive value more than its economics. If you don't believe me, go to Kendall Square and ask somebody what they're paying per square foot, right? And then ask a broker, are there any cheaper options? There's a ton of cheaper options in the Boston metro area. There's a ton of cheaper options in Philadelphia. You know where the highest rents in Philadelphia are today? They're in the University City District, right? Down there where Penn and Drexel and Children's Hospital and Penn Presby all come together. Those are the highest rental rates in the city, higher than downtown and the gleaming office towers. Certainly higher than the suburban office parks out around King of Prussia. Why? Because it's more creative and productive. I can do more things. Access, proximity, infrastructure, relationships with institutions of higher education, with laboratories, with research institutions, with academic medical centers. And so the value of that can't be underestimated, particularly for growing companies, but even for companies at scale and even large ones, and I'll talk about that in a second. So take a look around at your younger employees and ask them where they live today, right? Ask them how many of them have cars. I just came from LA, and last week I was in San Francisco looking at some incredible live, work, play, learn kinds of environments, right? Probably all of you know that driver's license being held by those from 16 to 25 are at historic lows. Car ownership for those under 35 are at historic lows, right? Today's millennial generation and following that, Gen Z, Gen Z, they want to live, work, play, learn in a very tight spatial geography, right? They want downtown Durham, not Research Triangle Park. And they want to be where it's active, where it's engaged, where I can get a pint or a cup of coffee. Now, this has a lot of other important things to it as well, such as these are where the collisions happen, right? If you want to create new ideas in Cambridge, you know, everybody's in their Pfizer lab, they're in their MIT lab, they're in their Harvard labs, they're all together in their labs doing their thing. Go to the bar, restaurant, burger place called Miracle of Science. Go to Legal Seafood, go to Commonwealth, go to Catalyst. That's where you start making those connections, right? In the ground floor retail, in the restaurants, at the events that are happening. Go to Venture Cafe at the CIC in Cambridge or Miami or St. Louis, and that's where that kind of environment is. But it isn't just for the millennials. What we are also seeing are seasoned faculty members and researchers getting more entrepreneurial themselves. And because of that, wanting their research, or maybe their teaching, and their company all to be within a tight spatial geography, right? They don't want to drive back and forth 10 or even 15 minutes between a lab and where they may have a company. And so it starts to become a recruiting tool to be able to do that, to create that kind of environment. And when you think about live, work, play, learn, you're really thinking about density with what I call within proximity, right? So for the chemists in the room, if I can remember my chemistry, the more heat I put up and the more pressure I put on something, the more the atoms collide one with another, right? It's the same kind of concept in creating real estate. And finally, and this is something I take very seriously because of where we happen to work. So Wexford does only one thing. We create innovation districts. And we do it at scale with major research institutions, universities, and academic medical centers. We have 15 of these all around. But there are places like West Baltimore with the University of Maryland, West Philadelphia here with Drexel and Penn and the Science Center, Overtown in Miami, right, with the University of Miami, St. Louis, not too far from Ferguson, with Washington University, Lambert's Point with Old Dominion University. All of these economically disenfranchised but proud and historic communities. So how do you use innovation to remove economic disparity by creating social and economic inclusion? And that is the key that a lot of today's mayors and council people and governors are really looking at, right? Because it's great to have a live, work, play, learn community. It is not great if you have one of those and your mid-skill jobs or your service workers are living in RVs out on the street, which is exactly what I saw in Palo Alto 7 days ago. I'm driving down, I think it's called El Camino Real, and there must have been 40 RVs just lined up with people living in them. So there's a way to address that as well. So with these as the economic drivers, what we really need to respond to those is this kind of environment. I call it a knowledge community. Heavily programmed, mixed use, activated, curated environment that sits on a foundation of research, discovery, entrepreneurial activity, and corporate engagement. And it has as its component parts kind of four things, right? The first and most important is kind of the institutional's value proposition. There are three ways to look at an innovation district, right? If you've read Rise of Innovation Districts by Bruce Katz and Julie Wagner, they say there's three ways to do it. Number one is that government takes the lead. That's not really a North American model. It is a European model. So you go to Eindhoven, you go to Barcelona, you go to Berlin, you go to Rotterdam. Government kind of takes the lead on that. I don't know that our government's up to that task, right? So let's set that one aside. The second is that business takes the lead. So think about all the great things that Tony Hsieh has done for downtown Las Vegas. Think of what Dan Gilbert has done in Cleveland and particularly in downtown Detroit. And so, yeah, business can take the lead. The third is that institutions with intellectual capital really are those anchors. Universities, academic medical centers, research institutions, and I put in that category federal labs. And we believe they're the only sustainable. And the reason we believe they're the only sustainable real anchors, what did we say a minute ago on the back slide? Talent is a real currency of innovation. And so who is that dense environment of talent and particularly regenerates itself with new ideas and new talent? It's those intellectual capital institutions. So they are the value proposition. That is why you will pay more to be in the Science Center, right, here in the University City District than you will to be in King of Prussia, because you can be next to Drexel and you can be next to Penn and Children's Hospital. It's why you'll pay to be next to MIT or Stanford or WashU or Brown and a new one that's emerging in downtown Providence. So that's kind of the primary thing. And that requires a whole bunch of different models. We'll talk about 310's driving that, but as I walked kind of amongst the booths here for a minute, I saw that you guys are looking, how do we create these new models for corporate relations, for engaging companies, for being more open? Those are the models that it requires, and they're multidimensional. Tech transfer is a part of it. FLC does an excellent job in tech transfer. Universities, not so much. Some really good, some average. Most are still honestly thinking that they've got the next Gatorade or Google, and they don't want to let it go. And so what happens is you have billions and billions of federal research sitting on the shelves in binders that never see the light of day, right? So I applaud what you're trying to do, because we need to get that stuff out a lot more, and we can also use it as a magnet. Innovation infrastructure is kind of the second, right? And that really is creating those smaller innovation spaces, whether it's the Cambridge Innovation Center or a Lab Central or maker spaces, right? To encourage small and young companies who want to be near the intellectual capital of these large institutions. The third is kind of this community support. So in an innovation district, 40% of the jobs do not require a four-year degree. So it becomes really important now to supporting innovation at scale that you can fill those middle skill and technician class jobs. So how do you integrate the community colleges into something, right? How do you create this environment where workforce development is as important as well? And then finally, it's the environment. Right? Cool buildings, live, work, play, learn, mixed use, engaging public realm, good parks, strong pedestrian experience. Notice that I put the building last, which is probably not what you'd be expecting from a real estate developer. So we've kind of talked about this, how you leverage that institution. That is what it's all about. And companies want to be near your institutions, right? And they're looking for ways. I know they can't come inside the fence and look around, but that's why Sandia has a research park, right? That's why Thomas Jefferson Accelerator is doing some things outside the gate. That's why the Army Research Lab has its centers, one of which has been announced will be in a project we're doing with the University of Chicago. And I'm sure there's many others that I'm missing, but that's why people are stepping outside the gate to be able to create those relationships, right? And to draw companies closer. Right, concentrating these innovation elements. This is a building called 4240. It's in St. Louis, Missouri. It has Boeing's Phantom Works. It has Cambridge Innovation Center's first location outside of Massachusetts, 130 companies. Has the innovation assets of Washington University all together in one place. Has Ralston Purina, it has Uber, it has Square, it has MasterCard. Express Scripts, Emerson Electric, all together. The innovation elements kind of wanting to be near each other. In fact, when Boeing came to it, we wrote into their lease that they could not have a coffee pot or a breaker, right? Instead, we cut a staircase that took them right up into the kitchen of the Cambridge Innovation Center. Like your house, these kitchens are where everybody gathers. We didn't want everyone gathering in their own offices. We want them all coming into a common kitchen to gather with one with another. And it's been wildly successful. All right, prosperity for the community and beyond. This is actually a program at the Baltimore City Community College. All right, so West Baltimore, a very, very poor neighborhood if you've been in it, very disenfranchised. And the project at the University of Maryland, Baltimore, which is the professional schools of University of Maryland, did was on the west side of Martin Luther King, where nobody had ever gone before. And so we created this environment, but as we created the environment, we knew we needed this kind of workforce development. So we worked with BCCC to bring their Life Sciences Institute in there. Every student is guaranteed an internship with one of the companies in the park. Every student is invited to every program that we do. So the students are mixing with scientists, they're mixing with business people, they're mixing with growth companies and with established companies. 99% of those students now get employment. It's decreased by about 20% though over the last 2 years. Because those 20% have chosen to walk across the street and complete their 4-year degree in laboratory sciences at the University of Maryland. Right? And so you're creating these kinds of pathways, particularly into the neighborhoods. So as these environments get larger, you're creating more and more opportunity across all communities and reducing some of the problems with gentrification. And then there's nothing like programming to bring people together. Right? You know scientists a lot better than I do. They do incredible work and incredible research, and they do it in their lab, and they tend not to come out, right? Because they're doing important work. Got to get them out. Whether it's yoga in the park or concerts. And so this is Bailey Park. This sits in the middle of 1.2 million square feet of the old R.J. Reynolds tobacco warehouses where Camel cigarettes were made in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. It is now the central gathering place for the scientists out of Wake Forest University and the doctors out of Wake Forest Baptist Health and all of the small companies that populate this, as well as the millennials living in the condos and the lofts, as well as the community in the traditional African-American neighborhood of Goler Heights, as well as people just from downtown who are looking for something exciting to do. And so people have made connections they would never make in any other form. One of the programs that we ran for this was actually called Merge. It brought two scientists together to look at a single thing from two different points of view. All right? We decided it was going to be the skin, largest organ in the body. Right? So who knows more about skin than a dermatologist, right? So a dermatologist comes to stand up and kind of do what they know about skin, and they invited all their dermatology friends and their clients and doctor colleagues and everything. Who else knows almost as much about skin as a dermatologist? Anybody? Shut the answer out if you know it. I'm sorry? You're getting there. Tattoo artist. Tattoo artist. So we invited a tattoo artist, and he invited all of his friends and his clients, which didn't look a lot like the doctor's friends and clients. So you had 400 people there who would probably never meet each other in any other circumstance. And the thing went 2 hours past the time it was supposed to. And an incredible place to bring dissimilar people together, right? Actually, innovation and the arts really blend well, right? If any of you are researchers or scientists, many of you may be artists or musicians, talk to researchers and scientists, many of whom play an instrument or dabble in art. There's something about that creativity that is the glue that holds people together. So let's talk about 3 trends now that we know a little bit about innovation districts and we know what the drivers are of innovation. Let's talk about 3 trends that I think is actually moving, if you will, this environment in your direction. The first trend is this de-anchoring is broadening, right? And by de-anchoring, what I mean are institutions are taking pieces and intentionally putting them in different places to act as catalysts. It can be an economic development catalyst. In the case of Arizona State University. So President Michael Crow said, Phoenix is dead. If you know ASU, their campus is actually in Tempe. They have a few others. But their main campus is in Tempe, which is about a 20-minute drive from downtown Phoenix. And here's a large American city that honestly is pretty dead downtown. And so what Crow decided, I think it's been about 6, maybe 8 years ago, was we can be a catalyst for the revitalization of downtown. Because we have lots of students, actually have lots and lots of students, 88,000 of them on campus, right? And so we can take some of those students and we can put them downtown. And because they'll be downtown, they'll want to eat downtown. They'll want to live downtown. They'll spend money downtown. But I got to be intentional about who I put. I can't just chuck anybody downtown. Who needs to be downtown? Walter Cronkite School of Journalism. They should be downtown. I'm going to put them downtown next to the TV stations and the newspaper. That's a good place for them. The law school should be downtown. I'm going to put them next to the Sandra Day O'Connor Federal Courthouse. That'll work. And then now they are doubling down on that by bringing downtown to revitalize what's known as the Phoenix Biomedical Campus, a new project that we're doing. They're bringing then elements of the Biodesign Institute and health sciences down into that environment because it's near the hospitals, it's near the cancer center, it's near the University of Arizona Medical School, and so you create this vibrant environment, de-anchoring a piece that needs to be there. In the same way that ARL has really kind of created these environments, right? The newest one, I think they just opened with Northeastern, right? And I think I was talking, I think his name's Jason, forgive me if I didn't get it right. And we were talking about the other locations they have at USC, at the University of Texas at Austin, with the University of Chicago in the project that we're doing. And so kind of coming and taking something, putting it closer to where it needs to be. Square, same thing. Ralston Purina, dog food people. Same thing. So what's the result you get from that? You get a result that looks like this. Fleischmann's. Everybody know what Fleischmann's is? Bakers, yeast. How scientific is yeast? It's the oldest yeast company in the world. It's partnered from now what's called Allied British Foods. And they used to sit in a suburban office building in St. Louis. And they decided sales were lagging, yeast isn't exciting. The average age of their worker was 58. Now I'm actually talking about the kind of that, what I'll call the headquarters research. There's actually research done in it. They have baking kitchens, right? So I mean, they work with Krispy Kreme and others. Krispy Kreme's having a problem. They don't like how the donuts are working out. They have all the equipment that Krispy Kreme would have. And so Krispy Kreme people would go to A.B. Mowry, and they'd sit there and they'd try and figure out the problems, right? But they decided that there's a different way to do this. They want to be in one of these hyper-activated environments. So they came down to a building called the 4240 building in a place called Cortex, which is the innovation community in St. Louis, and they put their North American headquarters there. Today, the average age of the workers after 3 years is 32 and continuing to trend down. The number of people who ride public transportation, bike, or walk to work is now north of 50%. Their sales have doubled. They have gotten into beer and wine, and they're actually doing biological research there as well. Because they're in this environment. You talk to Mark Pendergast, who's a very engaging Australian who runs the business for them, and he'll tell you that we put it there on purpose intentionally because of this environment that we're in. Same thing with Boeing. Boeing decanted. Boeing has big campuses, in St. Louis. They decanted something, put it there because they want to be close to the students of WashU and all of the companies up in the Cambridge Innovation Center. They run what's called the Boeing Patent Challenge, right? Open their patent portfolio, let kids comb through it, find something, get up a team of 3 or 4, come up with an idea, and there's a big pitch day, I think, at the end of the month. The students who won the pitch day, I think, had an engineer, they had a couple of tinkerers, I think they had a kid who was in programming, they had somebody who was actually in liberal arts as well, and what they had found was that Boeing had a technology for imaging technology for looking at the integrity of welds in the airplane's body or the integrity of something within the wing, and they found a way to use that to look inside the bone, right, to find, I think it had to do with bone cancer, to find things in the human body. Boeing now stepped into the healthcare space, a space they'd wanted to get into and couldn't find a way in, just because they were in a different kind of environment. And then NATO, if you're familiar with NATO's Global Innovation Hub in Norfolk, Virginia, it's part of Allied Command Transformation, was actually one that we helped design for them. I gave a speech kind of like this in London to their industry day, where I actually challenged them to find a new way to bring their traditional platform partners, people that make missiles and planes and ships, and bring them together with entrepreneurs, coders and tinkerers and others to solve problems a little bit quicker, but the big guys are the ones that can scale them to the kinds of solutions that national militaries need. And so it became a global innovation hub. Second, place matters a lot, right? So Bruce Katz, Julie Wagner, their seminal work, The Rise of Innovation Districts. If you've read any Enrico Moretti, it's called The New Geography of Jobs. All of these talk about these kinds of innovation districts, these mixed-use elements. So, where would you rather work? Anybody recognize this area, where it's from? It's Research Triangle Park. All right, so it's the cut of the Research Triangle Park. And actually, I like RTP, so what I'm going to say is not meant to be judgmental on Bob Giolis, who ran it for a long time, or Scott Levitan, who now runs it. So what you are looking at in this picture, it's about 1 million square feet of lab and office, okay? Takes up 30 acres. It's very suburban. It's automobile dependent, as you can tell. Those big things are called parking lots, and there's lots of them. There's curvy streets. So it's kind of homogeneous. All the buildings are, they have a 35, 45-foot height limits. All the buildings are 2 or 3 stories for the most part. And it's kind of disintegrated. What do you think about that? That is 4 million square feet of lab and office. That's 100,000 square feet of innovation space. 50,000 square feet of retail, about 30,000 square feet of just open gathering programmable space, has 300 plus units of housing on it, park, public realm, there'll be a K-8 school on it, has this urban fabric, pedestrian, actually connects, it's activated, and it sits on half the space. And happens to sit about 20 blocks away from where we are today. So this is what's called U City Square, and it is being developed by Wexford with the University or City Science Center. So you might hear a little bit about it when the Science Center folks are up here. Some of these buildings exist today. 3 of them exist. One of them we had topped out on and will deliver at the end of 2019. Has a street grid. Integrates into both Penn's campus and going the other way towards Drexel's. Live, work, play, learn, actually heal too, because on the other side of 38th Street, here's Penn Presby Hospital. Now, this is Philadelphia, but I will tell you that Purdue University is looking at something very similar in West Lafayette, Indiana, right? So urban core helps because you can leverage a whole bunch of existing amenities, but is not a requirement. Right? There are going to be urban elements anywhere outside of any of your gates. Third trend is, at the end of the day, it is about much, much more than the real estate. So you look at this right here. Everything in orange is a program. Notice as you get more complex, going as a knowledge community, it's less about the real estate, more about the programming. It's all about activation, integration, collaboration, and curation. And what you get is this kind of activated environment, right? Where people want to gather, where people want to be. Lower left-hand corner is actually a pop-up garden here in Philadelphia. The Philadelphia Horticultural Society does several pop-up gardens. We do one with them. So the 14 acres I showed you with all that stuff, well, it's not all developed yet, right? Some of it is, but since we're going dense, we got land. I don't want the land just to sit there and be empty land. So why not create a pop-up garden? Why not create gathering places, kill the dead space until we're ready to build a big building? You just keep moving the temporary uses around. So another look at Bailey Park, Cortex Commons, which is the center there in St. Louis of all their programming and what they do. All right, so I think I'll stop there and ask if there's any questions. I know I've gone on probably a little bit longer than you wanted me to, but I did promise I would take questions, and if you don't want to shout your question out here, I'll be around a little bit, and we can chat as well. Yes, sir.
Have you done one in proximity to a federal lab?
So that's a great question. We have not yet. We have looked. We have looked at actually doing ones in proximity to 3 federal labs, but we've not done it yet. And in fact, let me skip through the Philadelphia page here. And one of the reasons is there's a number of success factors, and one of them, one of the first ones is it has to be viewed as a critical element of the institution's strategy. And we tend to work with universities as well. A couple of while the federal labs have incredible intellectual capital, the universities that I'm thinking of that are right there with them, it wasn't yet a top priority. And so that's why we haven't pulled the trigger yet. But these things also tend to take a lot of time. I mean, from the time I start talking about something till the time we do something can be 3 to 4 years. Things that we thought were dead 1 year pop up a couple years later, a change of leadership, a change of strategy, a change of the market. We would certainly consider doing one with the federal lab. I am actively in conversation with a university who is trying to bring a federal lab to the table to do one. So that's a great question. Yes, ma'am.
So the care and feeding of it, so you're a developer, you started,
Uh-huh.
but it needs to be sustained. And
Yeah.
Is that part of your success factors? And are you involved in that, or is that just a criteria for beginning?
Yeah.
And then at some point you need an exit strategy.
So that's a brilliant question. You could be a developer, So as a matter of fact, yes. So down at the bottom, the last two, a governance structure and a dedicated leader. So we're a special kind of developer. We actually hold long term. So we do not build things and flip them, right? Universities plan on 100-year time cycles. So we align our interests with the university. So we don't flip. So we're long-term hold. So number one, we're kind of dedicated to the success of the project. What I showed you in Philadelphia, that is a 12-year cycle, right? And we've already been working here with the Science Center and Drexel and Penn for 12 years already. So we're in it for the long haul. But to unpack your question a little bit more, without getting too real estatey, there's actually something called common area maintenance that people pay within buildings. We actually create, that's why we like governance structures, because they can be the collectors of it. We create what we call a park CAM. So we pay it on all of our buildings. We ask the hotel developers, the residential developers, others to pay it as well. So it gives you a pot of money to allow you to hire staff and to do the programming. And the bigger it gets, the bigger the pot gets. And then we add to that pot in a couple of other places. For instance, in Maryland, the park CAM is $325, which is a little steep, but the tenants were okay with it being steep because $2 of that gets peeled off into a special community fund that does a number of activities within the communities of West Baltimore to actually improve those neighborhoods and those conditions as well. So yes, our model is for them to be sustainable. Your question's a good one, what happens when you go away? That's why it's always good to have a governance structure, like, the Science Center is a perfect example of a governance structure. 50 plus years old, 31, I think, different constituents, and that really is the sustaining glue for it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, many of the federal labs are in rural areas. Most of your examples, I think, sort of touched on it briefly.
Yeah.
Not in rural areas. Any comments on that? Examples of successes in rural areas?
So that's where I think this concept of de-anchoring can come in a little bit as well. So I mean, that's why ARL's putting things in some different places. But I will say, while we have not done anything rural, and I don't know if you consider West Lafayette, Indiana necessarily rural, but